Welcome to Dr. M's Vodcast, a vodcast with a mission to connect continuous improvement professionals across the world.
Good morning, good evening, and the best thing to do is the Indian way of saying namaste. I'm going in for my standard work to introduce Lonnie Wilson. Now that's where I have an issue. I can edit it all right, but here we go. Is that visible?
Yep.
Yes, I can see it, Dr. M.
Okay, we are on the 11th episode, and Dr. M's, and all these Dr. M's episodes have been on. Dr. M's launch has been dedicated to Sensei Masaki Imai. And that's Lonnie Wilson for you, Anatomy of Trust. Principal consultant and owner of Quality Consultants, and a manager. He was a manager of technical of Chevron. A chemical engineer, and the author of 10 books. I've named a few of them here. Is the only author who has written on lean refinery, and his latest book, which we follow as a textbook, is The Science of Workforce Engagement. And two of his books are there as textbooks studied in schools and colleges in US. So that's the part of it. And we hand it over to Lonnie to talk to us about the anatomy of trust. Thanks a lot, and over to you, Lonnie.
Very good. Let me see if I can share the screen here. Oops, I can't find the screen share. Where'd it go?
Go ahead, Lonnie. It was my...
There we go. Pardon me. Okay, I've described it as the anatomy of trust. There's a little bit of history behind that, and I'll take you from where I started to where we are today. And that is, I really didn't seriously start thinking about this until I wrote my first book, which was, my thinking went into it in like 2006 or 2008, so almost 20 years ago. And I was trying to understand what trust really was, because I think as I talk to my peers, they have a vastly different opinion of what trust is. And so I researched the psychology and spent a lot of time understanding like the difference between beliefs and behaviors and attitudes and opinions and and I found that trust was the more I worked with it, the more fundamental I found it to be. And fundamental, I'll describe fundamental in just a moment. But as I was studying it, I found that the more I learned about it, kind of the less I understood. And it kept getting broader and broader and broader, and I kept bringing in other kinds of topics. And I asked myself, what's the difference between trust and faith? And what's the difference between trust and confidence? And is trust just a positive feeling, or can you trust in a negative way? And so I built this small model, and I put it in my first book, and it really just had two dimensions to it. And the two dimensions describe most of what goes into trust. But later, as I was reality testing it, I found that wasn't right, and I added a third dimension. And one of the things I'd like to do here today is cultivate that dimension with you, because I don't know what it is. I'm not sure. I've got some ideas and I've got some thoughts, and some of them even make sense. But I want to talk about the whole issue of trust. And so I've got about a 10-minute presentation that I'm going to make. And then I want this to turn into a dialogue. Um, my objective is not to teach you about trust. My objective is for us to cultivate the topic of trust and gain a broader understanding across the entire group. I do not profess to be uh, the consummate knowledge on trust. I just want to be the consummate catalyst that creates people to think about it. Um, and so this will be a very two-way discussion. Okay. So with that said, let me dive into it. And why are we here? Why are we here? I learned this from Dr. Deming in his 4-day seminars. He would ask that question. And as soon as he'd ask that question, he would answer it. And he said, we're here to learn, to have some fun, and make a difference. So I hope that we can learn from one another. I hope that when all is said and done, we find it an enjoyable experience. And then I hope we can take this, whatever it is that we learned, and put it to use and make a difference. So to do this, we'll cultivate a dialogue, and Dr. M and I have coined this term steechers. Okay, we are all steechers, and steechers is a conflation of teachers and students. Because I've long ago found out that if you really want to learn a subject, teach it. And so by almost definition, we're all teachers are students, and students are designed to learn. So we are simultaneously both if we really want to learn it. Okay. And finally, kind of the overriding theme to everything I'm talking about in a broader sense than trust comes from a quote from Peter Senge. And Peter Senge said, shared meaning is really the cement that holds society together. Shared meaning is really the cement that holds society together. And so keep that in mind as we go through this. Everything is really focused on getting a shared meaning. With that said, let's dive into what I call the grand scheme of things. And I want to introduce you to a topic I call OFED. Okay. And OFED is, well, hold on, I'll tell you in just a minute. Okay. But the grand scheme consists of this. Okay. And by the grand scheme, I'm talking about if you're in a business and you want to improve it. Now, we can use that metaphor in a lot of different places. If you're in a family and you want to improve it, if you're in a nonprofit and you want to improve it, if you're on a soccer team and you want to improve it, how do you go about doing it? But the model that I'm using is business, mostly because that's what I do as a consultant. But I think it's a very fungible concept that applies to all kinds of things. Okay. But I like to say that connections create relationships. Okay. And to that end, I want to give a great shout out to Dr. M because that's his mission is to create relationships amongst those geeks like you and me who want to improve things. And he's been great at it. And his lounge is just one of the formats that he uses to create those connections. And you're here and we're doing it. Okay. But connections create relationships. And it's my belief that relationships are what makes things happen. Okay. And relationships, as you cultivate them, creates trust. Okay. Almost never is there instant trust between people. The trust it grows over time. You may have a certain level, but it becomes much different as you pass through experiences. Okay. Trust is what creates cooperation. And there's a synergism that trust creates cooperation and cooperation creates trust. Okay. Which is true. This is not a linear progression that you go through. There's all kinds of feedback loops and interactions. Okay. But then cooperation creates synergy. When we cooperate, the sum of our actions can be much greater than I mean our total actions can be much greater than the sum of our individual actions. That's synergy. And synergy is what creates success. That's the difference between successful and unsuccessful companies, families, soccer teams, whatever it happens to be. If they can work together, they're going to be better than if they're working in isolation. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part, synergy is what makes it. Okay. And in a minute, I'll jump into tell you what OFED is. Okay. Um, But OFED is open, honest, fact-based, empathetic dialogue. And that is the common theme that goes through all of this. When you connect with people, when you create relationships, when you develop trust, when you foster cooperation, when you develop synergy, it's all based on open, honest, fact-based, empathetic dialogue. Okay. And by open, I mean transparent. All subjects are open for discussion. Honest, of course, everybody knows what honest means. Okay. Fact-based. I don't mean it's a bunch of opinions. I mean, you've got facts behind it. If you state opinions, that's fine, but make sure you state them as opinions and not facts. Okay. And empathetic means you're going to consider the feelings and the issues and the concerns and the situation and the context and the culture of the other people. Empathetic. And dialogue is the key word. Okay. Dialogue is not discussion. Discussion is completely different. Okay. In the United States, we confuse dialogue with discussion. We think they're the same thing. But the root word of discussion is a Latin word discutere, okay? And it means to argue. And that's what discussion's about. They're arguments, okay? And in a discussion, you're trying to convince the other person that you're right and they're wrong, okay? In discussion, you're trying to force your opinion on other people or your facts, okay? Okay? And so it's an argument, it's a debate. Dialogue is not an argument. It's not a debate. In dialogue, what you're trying to get out is everybody's information, okay? So that then jointly, you and the other people can come up with a solution, a concept, an idea, a problem statement, whatever it happens to be, that is better than what any one individual can do. So you're trying to take all of the information, put it together, and come up with something that's larger than any of the pieces. That's dialogue, okay? And dialogue requires a whole different set of skills than discussion. Okay. Well, I shouldn't say there's a lot of overlap between them, but the difference is the openness that you approach the topic. Are we trying to figure out how we can do this better, or do I want you to do what I think? That's the difference between dialogue and discussion. Okay. And and this is the catalyst that creates the process of making connections, of creating relationships, of developing trust. It's the catalyst that is common to all of those steps. And it's the catalyst or the method that sustains those steps. Okay. And at the heart of this is trust. And trust is just an amazing thing. But it's very fragile. There are very few concepts in our language that are as fragile as trust. And I like to say trust is gained by drips and drops, but lost by the buckets full. Okay. And and you can it takes a while to build up trust because you're asking people to make it an investment of themselves in you. Okay. And they will do that slowly but surely as long as things go okay. But then you can do some things to destroy the trust. And man, when you destroy the trust, it's like going off a cliff. Now you got to start all over again. It's a very fragile thing. Okay. Okay, so let's get into the anatomy of trust. I'm going to build this little model and then I'm going to quit talking. Well, I'll just interject myself as another person, but I'll quit monopolizing the conversation. Let me put it that way. But my first concept of trust was that it was built on two variables. And I'm talking about the trust between me and you. Okay. And it was built on competency and shared values. Okay. Shared values in that we both believe in the same things as being good or bad. Um, and the other thing is competency. Okay. And here's one of the first things I learned about trust is you do not trust people. Okay. You trust them too. Okay. There's always a subject matter that you trust. Okay. And I like to use the example of my next door neighbor, okay, who's just an absolutely wonderful person. Okay. And I would trust him to watch over my kids while they're in the swimming pool. He'd look over the fence and keep an eye on them. And if something happened, I would trust him to react properly. Okay. But I would not trust him to change out the water heater in my plant, in my house. Okay. Because Brad, that's his name, Brad, doesn't know the difference between a pair of water pump pliers and a crescent wrench. His mechanical IQ is somewhere in single digits. Okay. But he has wonderful personal values. But he's not competent in that. So I wouldn't trust him to do that. But I would trust him to guard my most precious commodity, my kids and grandkids, well, and wife. Okay. So you always trust based on some level of competency. Okay. And I think in today's world, just an editorial comment, I think that's one of the reasons why so many people do not trust their managers, because their managers don't understand what they're doing. Their managers are not competent very often in the intricate details of what needs to be done. Okay. And so, how is he supposed to tell me what to do when he doesn't understand the process, or he doesn't understand the people, or he doesn't understand the customers? Okay. So competency is a big issue. And I developed this matrix where if you have low competency and low levels of shared value, you have a distrust. Okay. And if on the other hand, you have a low level of shared values, but the people are very competent, okay, your reaction to them might be respect or it might be fear. Okay? On the other hand, if they have a low level of competency and high shared values, like my friend Brad, my reaction to him is one of affection. I like him. He's a nice guy, wonderful person. Have him over for dinner all the time. Okay. But if my car breaks down, I'm not going to call him up. He's not going to be able to help me. I can't trust him to fix that. And at the top is trust. And trust goes from the bottom left to the upper right in terms of increasing levels of trust. That was my first moment. Then I started seeing things that didn't quite fit. And I decided I needed a third dimension. And so I put in there that you tend to trust people when they express some level of vulnerability. Now, everybody has vulnerability. You know that. Okay. But some people will never express it at all. And they're being less than completely honest with you. They may not be telling you untruths, but they're not completely honest with you. And that's one of the things that you expect. That's one of these shared values that's so important to you. Okay. And so that's the reason that many managers and supervisors are not trusted, because there's this image, particularly in the States, particularly in the Americas, Canada and Mexico and Central America all included, is that managers, by definition, know their stuff. You're not supposed to question them on the technical issues. But the reality is they don't. Okay? There's all kinds of managers that come into a business at mid-level and high-level management who got there because they have a master's degree in business administration. But they don't understand the fundamental concept, mechanical details of making the product. They don't understand the processes. They don't understand the needs of the customer. And what they understand is the finances. They can look at the spreadsheets, they can look at the annual reports, etc., and they can be very conversant about those, but not about the things that need to be done on the floor, so to speak. So I interjected this concept of vulnerability, and you will trust people, and at the low level of vulnerability is what I call detachment. Okay, and we're going to talk about how you trust them if they're completely detached from you. At the high level is you expect them to be willing to sacrifice for you. Okay. Let me give you an example. Let's say you go into a meeting and you're the maintenance manager, and the boss says, "Hey, we've got to cut costs." And the maintenance manager says, "Hey, if I cut and that's going to hurt the plant." And everybody says, okay, we understand that. Okay. And since Andre, the maintenance manager, can't cut costs, I, the production manager, have to cut more. To me, that's a sacrifice. Working together for the greater good. Okay. So I think at the higher levels of trust, you're willing to sacrifice for the greater good. Okay. So let me finish off the cube here and put a couple of words in here besides that. Okay. Now, I believe trust comes in two modes, two distinctly different modes that kind of overlap and intersect and all kinds of things. It's kind of a spectrum. And one mode is what we call predictability. If people are predictable, you can trust them. Okay. But what do you trust them to do? Okay. Like I like to say, I trust politicians. What do I trust them to do? I trust them to not tell me the whole truth. I trust them to lie. Why? Because it's predictable. They'll do that. Okay. I trust them to work more for their own benefit than for the benefit of the greater good. I trust them to be self-serving rather than public servants. Okay. Why? Because that's what I've seen. I don't know what life is like in India or even Canada, but in the United States, the number one objective of every politician in the House, the Senate, or wherever is reelection. It's not public service, it's reelection. They want to keep their job. Okay. The other mode is positive regard. That's the type of well, we'll get into it a little more. Okay. But if we look at the one of predictability, okay, that's a transactional relationship. Remember, we want trust to create relationships, build relationships, and strengthen them. Well, a transactional relationship is if you do this for me, I will do that for you. Okay. It's the contract the company has with all their suppliers. That's a transactional relationship. And you expect them to follow that. And you literally trust them to follow that. That's why you signed the contract. If you didn't trust them to do that, you wouldn't sign a contract with them. Okay. And if you trust them even less, you put in penalty clauses. Okay. And if you trust them even less, you do other things. Okay. But that's a transactional relationship. I will do this for you. I expect you to do that for me. Okay. It's the reason you work for most companies. I will give you my brilliance, and you will give me your pay. Okay. That's a transactional relationship. At the other end of the spectrum, on this back plane, which we can't see, okay, is the transformational relationship. Okay. And a transformational relationship is you and I will work together for the greater good of everybody. Okay. It's to transform the system so that everybody wins. Okay. You might hear the terms win-win and win-lose. Okay. This front plane is win-lose. Okay. If you're my customer and you tell me I've got to reduce my cost, you win, I lose. Okay. If on the other hand, I'm the customer and you're the supplier, and I say, hey, we got to cut costs. Okay. Now I win and you lose. Okay. That's the nature of a transactional relationship. Okay. They're almost all what we call competition. Whoops. There we go. Okay. Where the back plane is based on cooperation instead of competition. Okay. So the front plane is all about win-lose. The back plane is all about win-win. Okay. Now, the front plane is what we call the plane of the fixed pie. In other words, if I lose a buck a buck per part on this piece, you gain a buck per part on the piece. Okay. On the back, it's a win-win plane. How do we work this out so everybody wins? Okay. Now that's what Dr. Deming talked about. And if you've ever studied Dr. Deming very deeply, you'll find out that he said, what we're trying to accomplish is a transformation. That is our aim, a transformation. And what's a transformation? A transformation is when everybody wins. When the customer wins, when the supplier wins, when the employee wins, when the entire system wins, okay? And so if we go to cut wages so the profit can look better, so the bonus of the employees of the management goes up, that's not win-win. That's win-lose. Okay. And that's just a transactional relationship. On the other hand, if we find a way to expand the business and our profits go up and we have a profit sharing plan, now potentially everybody could win. Okay. But as we look at that cube, okay, pardon me. Okay. So there's just a couple more things I want to present here, and then we'll get open for questions and comments and whatever. But I like to talk about some of the issues that people think about, and one is leadership. Okay. And the front plane, leadership is all about controlling. It's all about command and control. It's all about, well, it's all about that. The black plane is all about leading by all kinds of different characteristics. Rather than command and control, it's what we might call servant leadership, or it's what I call it lean leadership. Okay. The front plane is all rigidity. Okay. The back plane is all about flexibility. The front plane is all about rules. The contract says, okay. And the back plane is all about context. Here's where we are today. What should we do now? Okay. And inclusiveness. Okay. And the front plane is all about conflict. And the back plane is all about cooperation. And we can put another 10 dimensions up there if we'd like to. Okay. But there's a clear distinction. Now where you are in this cube, okay, and here's the ideal spot up here, huh? That's the place of maximum trust. And then down on the bottom left-hand corner would be the place of minimum trust. Okay. Now that's the model that I developed, and that's the model I've taught for quite some time. But I have some concerns about it. And the concern is that scale right there. But anyway, we can get into that. So let me see. Okay. With that said, I would like to open it up. Okay. And any topic is fair game. We can talk about the difference between trust and faith. We can talk about the difference between trust and confidence. We can talk about the components of trust. We can talk about the merits of trust. And one of the things that to me is very controversial is is trust really, does trust always have to be a positive thing in that you trust people to behave positively? I've always believed that you can trust people to behave negatively, just like I told you about my idea about trust with politicians. But that's not commonly read in the literature. When you talk about trust and you hear about it in the literature, okay, and is trust a belief or is trust a behavior? Okay, we can talk about anything, but with that, I open it up to you, and let's talk about trust. Who has a question, comment, thought, whatever?
So Lonnie, I feel trust is a risk taken. That's like a partnership. Once we put the trust first, the first thing is that you should be ready to take the risk. But without you go first, for example, like a leader, they said a leader by example or something, it's almost impossible in that fear suffered. So that's why vulnerability, you in your model have a sacrifice. and detach. But there's a wisdom about balancing. If in the long-term run, all those kind of servant leaders must have ability to finish that long-term game. It means we have to love ourselves instead of being burned out and sacrificed. So that's my reflection on this point.
Okay. Anybody has any thoughts about what Zedong had to say? There's a lot in what he
Well,
said to unpack.
Lonnie,
Yeah, go ahead.
can I see you so that I can know that I can trust that you're listening to me? Sorry for that. Can I have this slide down so that I can express myself, because you're giving me the freedom not only to discuss
Oh, you want me to
model.
stop the share?
Yeah, I would like you to, so that you give me 2 minutes of my thoughts. First of all, I'll give you my thoughts. Is trust to me is, the minute I say trust, it looks like a vibration or a vibe. Okay, it's not anything. It's something abstract. And I do agree that it is a relationship. Which I also would add is two things. One is two factors. One is confidence, and the other one is credibility. You would have covered that in your model, sir, but I'm just expressing myself in my words. Now that relates to me two factors. One is intra-trust and inter-trust. And once you say relationship, it is not only human to human, it is that I trust this machine, I trust this environment, I trust this forecast, I trust the cloud is going to train or what have you. It's the predictability part of it that comes in, which you have defined it. So, the intra thing is the confidence within yourself. That do you have the confidence within yourself? Do you trust yourself to execute a job? Somebody else may, because that's a hidden factor within you. You may have a qualification. I may be whatever qualification. You may have the credibility or perceived credibility because of your qualification experience, but within yourself, do you have that confidence? So that's one aspect of the individual this thing, and that's where probably the learning, the education, the studies, the meditation, etc., makes you grow. So unless you start growing up, the credibility can be written in figures, etc., but cannot be demonstrated because you don't have that sort of a confidence. The other part of it is the credibility is again perceived, that are you credible to do that? That becomes the interpersonal. Prediction is important because I can predict that this machine won't work. I can predict that the shop floor, this would be the result. And at the last session which we had with David Boyce, it was said that management is all about prediction. So I'm not restricting it only to human to human. There are other factors, Lani, that we are talking about the organization. But one thing is that if you deep dive it probably at some other time, because I'm going back to your model, is that right from the time that you're in the mother's womb, and as you grow up, the symbiotic relationships start changing, the trust factor starts changing. We will leave that apart for some other day's discussion, because that's quite deep, and I don't think we have time for that. But all what I want to say is that it's some sort of a vibe, and prediction, which is negative or positive, and you can have that inter and intra. And what is easy for me to control is the self. I can develop myself. If I want to have a good relationship, I can develop myself. That is under my circle of influence. And then I can build up relationship. I may have to duck sometimes, I may have to move up or down, but that's under my control. For that, I got to grow within ourselves. Before we try to establish relations with the others, we have to establish relations with ourselves And we have to have confidence ourselves, and we believe that we have the credibility in ourselves. Full stop, and thank you very much for listening to me.
Okay, anybody have anything they'd like to build on with what Dr. M was talking about?
So if I may add something, how important is psychological safety for building trust?
You're asking me? What does the group think?
I think
How
it's
important
huge.
is psychological safety for building trust?
Okay. I'm just reflecting that back to the group. That's
Yeah.
a question for
I
the
think
group.
it's
What do you
I think
think?
it's
Does somebody have some
huge.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think it's crucial to in an organization, um, because if you don't have that there's how do you have trust if you don't have psychological safety? If you don't, if you're not free to speak and to act, um, and maybe you'll make mistakes, but if you have to work under that fear of retribution, if you make a mistake or if you step out of line,
Yes.
that's not a trusting
Yeah.
relationship.
What I can tell you, that was Nitin who asked that question?
Jagdeep.
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 Jagdeep? Okay.
Yeah.
What I can tell you is I built that into my model. I don't want to agree with you or disagree with you, but tell you what I did. I built that into my model because I think the manifestation of thinking that you're in a psychologically unsafe environment is for you to detach. Now, maybe just emotionally, okay,
Mm-hmm.
but also intellectually. And that's why I have down there vulnerability. Okay.
Yes.
And nobody vulnerable until they feel that it's safe, in my less than humble opinion. So my answer to your question, Jadeep, is yes. And my answer to my response to Brad would be Brad said not yes, he said hell yes. so so
Exactly. I mean, it
so
was
I it's my opinion that it's very important. I don't think you can have trust unless you have some sense of psychological safety, some tolerance for risk, some ability to understand that if you do something stupid or you do something stupid, you're still going to get by with it. You know, you're going to live through it. It's not a ego crushing event. You know, and
yeah.
so to me, it's huge. I think that's the word Brad used,
Mm-hmm.
and I built it in my
Yeah.
model that way, and I express it by that term of vulnerability. But I still have some concerns with that issue of vulnerability. But and
But I think
psychological
and
safety is kind of
Thank you.
big on the discussion scene nowadays.
yeah, but I think as a leader, to me, expressing vulnerability is a superpower because it's rare, but that's what connects, leadership to the employees. Yeah, for example, we had was working, um, and I won't name the company, but we were in a lot of distress. Um, the CEO had resigned. We had a new CEO. Um, the the business, there was layoffs, there was reorganization, everything, and some of the leaders of our division had an all hands, and they to give us sort of a status of what was going on, and they were up on, it was the senior people, and they were up there, and they were joking, and they were saying, yeah, we got rid of time cards, you don't have to do this. Where are you going on vacation next week? And they were just having a grand old time. And all the employees were saying, we're looking at this, and it's like, we're seeing our colleagues walk out the door. We're being laid off, and you guys are having joking and having fun. And so all the employees called into their managers and were complaining. It's like, what the hell's going on here? So that afternoon, the division CEO and the CEO of the entire company both released videos to explain the situation. Now, the corporate CEO was not there. The division CEO was part of that dais. The division CEO started off with, well, I really, I heard a lot of negative feedback. I hope you understand that I'm not taking, that I am taking the situation very seriously. That it's a critical situation, and I think you just misunderstood, my intention, which was to me was completely the wrong message, because that's putting the onus. The responsibility is not me; it's on you, because you misinterpreted me. So to me, that's destroying trust. Now you've got then the corporate CEO responded, shared a video to the company, to all the employees, and said, I heard what happened this morning. I wasn't there, but I sincerely apologize for what happened. That should not have occurred. We're in a very stressful situation. I take full responsibility for that occurring. And then he said, I'm new in this role as the corporate CEO. I'm going to make mistakes, but I'm trying to do the best I can for the people of this company. So please bear with me, because I may make mistakes, but in the end, I'm trying to do the best for the company. It was like I had never heard a CEO express vulnerability like that, to say, I do make mistakes. I'm not perfect, but please trust me because I'm doing the best I can. At that point, that corporate CEO, I would have walked through walls for that guy, because it was so rare, but it was so authentic, that he had my trust from that day on. And I think, and so to me, vulnerability is such a crucial property to be an effective leader, and to build. And Lonnie, to your point, that tie between expressing vulnerability and establishing trust.
I'd like to piggyback on that for just a second, Brad. When I wrote my last couple of books, they're about employee engagement. I had actually built a system dynamic model that explains how you create it and how you destroy it.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the factors in it is what I call the power of negativity. Okay. And so I did a bunch of research about how powerful is negativity. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to look at the news to see what makes the news. It's the bad stuff. It's the deaths. It's the murders. It's the wars. It's the hurricanes. It's not the wonderful things that the Mother Teresas of the world do. That's not newsworthy. What's newsworthy is disasters. And it used to be in the world of printed media, they had a phrase, and it said, if it bleeds, it leads. In other words, if it bleeds, it's the leading article in the paper. It's front page news. It's top line. If it bleeds, it leads. And it shows you how much we focus in on negativity. And I'm reminded of a video that I saw by Dr. Deming. And as wonderful a person as Dr. Deming was, he didn't like to be challenged. Not at all. And in this one video, a close friend of his, one of the few people who could probably get by with it, a guy by the name of Bill Cooper, challenged him. He said, well, Dr. Deming, this is what you said here, but earlier you said the following. And he said, no, I didn't. This is the way it is. And he said, Dr. Deming, he said, this is what you said. Here it is. Other people heard. No, I did not. And he said, well, I have it on this videotape if you'd like me to show it. Okay. And Dr. Deming realized that the jig was up, and he looked at Bill Cooper and he said, I am not going to apologize for learning. And I thought that was a brilliant statement,
Yeah.
Because I've written books, and I can go back to some of the books some of the things that I wrote, and I've changed some things. I've learned some things. I'm a little bit smarter. I'm a little bit brighter. You're less likely to trust others. Okay. And I think there's an internal component that has to do, like, vulnerability is more a behavior. Are you willing to act in a way that puts you at risk? Okay. But I think there's a deeper issue, which is what are you willing to do? In psychology, they call it projection. Okay. And it's been demonstrated time and time and time again that the things you dislike most in other people are the things you dislike in yourself. Okay. And you just project that onto them, and then you feel better about it. So you've got somebody to blame for it, I guess. Okay. But I think there's certain people who can't trust other people no matter what, because internally they're not a trusting sort. Now I don't know how to express that, because I've tried to put this in terms of of behaviors. Now, shared values are not behaviors, okay? But the other two axes are behaviors, how competent you are and how vulnerable you are. And there's a distinct difference between a belief and a behavior. A belief resides in your mind, okay? It may drive behavior, but it's not a physical thing. But your behavior is absolutely measurable, okay? You cannot measure your beliefs, well, except indirectly, okay? But you can directly measure your behavior. You can watch it. It's a physical thing. And so beliefs are different than behaviors, okay? And for example, when I was first doing this, uh, I discussed with myself sort of, I had this internal discussion, what's the difference between faith and trust? And well, let me just throw that out there. Do you as a group see a difference between faith and trust?
Yes,
Go ahead, Raj.
I think faith is something which you believe, that's your belief system. But whereas trust is the the confidence or the truthfulness of the other person what you have. So yeah, to me is that is what.
Lonnie,
Anybody else?
Lonnie, to me, faith, and now I'm getting into a little bit of spirituality. Not that I'm having any spirits, but getting into spirituality, faith is something when you don't have answer for certain circumstances, and therefore you just hang on to the faith that things will go right. It is not the belief. It is that you don't have currently an answer for a situation that you are in, and you are absolutely helpless and there's no help coming. And then you have a faith that something will turn out to be good or something will turn out to be bad. That to me is faith. It's some sort of I don't call it belief also. It's something that you're dependent on when you have no answers. That's to me is faith. You trust faith. That's, I don't know how it sounds.
Well, the delineation I make is that faith is the confidence that something happened and you don't need any data to support it. You take it on faith, okay? And in fact, if your faith is strong enough, you don't believe the data. Faith will transcend data, but trust almost always is related to data. As soon as you get some data that says, oops, you lose trust. Okay. And ultimately, to build up trust, you need positive data. Okay. Now, to me, the strongest trust building mechanism that exists is to make commitments and keep them. Everybody can do that. And that's very easy to measure. If somebody makes commitments and then don't keep them, I mean, you don't trust them. Or maybe you trust them to not make the commitment, to do not follow through. Okay. But trust is very much related to reliability, where you might say that faith is a blind trust.
Yeah,
Faith is just something you believe in spite of the you don't need any evidence to prove it. Almost all religions are based on faith.
it's, I don't know, I'm just talking it freely that it's when you are absolutely helpless and you cannot arrive at a logical conclusion or a solution or a dissolution, that you just, it looks like giving up and saying, now you help me, God. Okay, I don't have a conclusion, but then you take care of me. It's something like a sound of helplessness. I don't know how it sounds to you all.
He must. There's got to be more thoughts than that. What about trust and risk? What do you think is the relationship between trust and risk?
Trust at risk is inversely proportionate. Honestly, if there's less risk, you'll have more trust. If you have more risk, you'll have less trust. It's inversely proportional.
Anyone else?
Lani, I would say that trust is something means you know that it, you know the circumstances, you know the scenario, so you know the output will happen. That is what you say trust. And risk is, it is totally blind. Means you have no idea of what that scenario is, but you still take action, and we call it a risk.
Nitin, just a query. You go to a doctor for a surgery, trusting him or having faith in him or taking a risk?
50-50 nowadays.
Sorry for that. You go for a surgery, trusting him, having faith in him, or you're taking a risk.
50% is risk and 50% I would say today trust. Okay.
Sorry for that. No, that's because I had 2 surgeries in the last 2 years. So it's just
Okay, well, I noticed that we were scheduled for an hour, and I noticed we've gone over that just a little bit here. So I think if anybody has to go or wants to go, please leave with a clear conscience. If you want to stick around, I'll stick around, and I think Dr.
Lonnie,
M is prepared to stay around.
With your permission, I'll just go through what each of the people who have registered thought trust means to them, just to get it on record. And then
Okay.
we can wind up.
When we come back, I have a question for the whole group.
Yeah, so let's see what people have said about what does trust mean to you.
Oh, I've got to stop sharing, huh?
I'm sharing. Can you?
Yes, you're sharing,
You
Dr. M.
can see that?
Yep, we are able to see yours.
Yeah, I just want you all to see this was your perception, or this is what you all have declared before the session. You had the session and the discussion. We can debate, we can have a dialogue on this, or just for you to introspect as you wind up. So this is what these are truthfulness. There's Rajkumar. This is what you said: truthfulness, to rely on, or commitment.
Yes.
It's Sudeep Banerjee said, trust refers to a firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, the strength of a person, group, entity. It is the foundation of interpersonal relationship, business transaction, and effective societal functioning. That is what Banerjee said. Nitin, you said to believe. Sitong, you said a fundamental part of integrity. Mohammed said honest and reliable. We have Andre saying that employ the belief that someone is behaving in a way which is aligned with my values towards achieving something through cooperation or collaboration. It is contextual and come as granted or built in. Ashok said trust for an organization, which is better for an organization to do first. Sudeep, you said that the most important ingredient for survival in the present. Marco said that to me, trust means creating a nurturing environment of psychological safety, reliability, where both words and action consistently align. I learned that the trust is a foundation that enables meaningful change and sustainable improvement, and built through transparent communication, demonstrated competence, and unwavering integrity in delivering on commitment. And then we had I would not be able to pronounce that. Abdel said, working together with the no fear and comfort. For me, it is a mix of gut feeling, past experience with individual and persona of individual. That is what Oliver said. And trust means the confidence of an individual or a team that you are dealing with is as an invested in your success as much as you are, if not more so. Trust means unwavering confidence and faith in someone's integrity, reliability, commitment is built on consistency, transparency, accountability, and fosters a sense of security, belongingness, and mutual respect. A consciousness, that is what Surya Prakash said. Then this is what Catherine has said, a conscious relinquishing of fear. Ashok Motwani said, when one can count or rely on the other. And then Brad came up with another thing that he believes is that trust is an environment where an individual is free to conduct themselves and execute their responsibility with the understanding that those around them will provide support, guidance, and understanding to enable individual to not only successfully complete their given task, but also when able to expand their skill set and responsibility. So our request is that you can compare this with what Lonnie and we have been discussing. And probably when we have another session on the same subject, we can reflect on this, and maybe we can get a feedback from you all straight away as to what you all think. You all had mentioned earlier before the session, and with the inputs that Lonnie has given, is there any change in your thoughts with respect to trust? Go ahead.
Let me throw out another question, if I may.
Yeah.
And that is, when I started kind of my journey into what is this thing called trust, I kept asking the what question. What is it? Okay. But just recently, like a couple of years ago, I asked myself the why question. Everybody will tell you that trust is important. I don't think anybody disagrees on that. But why? Why is it important? Why do we care about this?
You're asking that question, right?
I'm asking this of the whole group, yes.
Yeah. Well, to me as human, the way I see it, we can't live in isolation. Imagine yourself being stranded in a desert. I mean, there are people who would say that that is detachment and you can survive without anything and you can be all alone. But there again, there has to be some relationship. Either, even if you're in a desert, you will start trusting the weather or trusting whatever. But when you're talking about human beings, there is some sort of a dependency for your own survival. And if you have a dependency for your own survival, whether it is material or human or what have you, you have to trust that that is good for you for your own survival. Basically, it is for self-interest. That's the way I look at it.
Anybody else? Other thoughts?
To me, why trust is that I can count on, so that there is someone is there. Or, for example, I need to share certain things of my personal things, or I give some work to get it done through somebody. So I need to have the trust. So whether this person is going to complete the work, so that is, or when I share something, yes, they are going to be with me, or they are going to support me. So for those kind of things, definitely trust is what is required.
Nitin?
As for me, I would say is like a positive vibe around you. So you feel safe, you feel happy, and you have a confidence. It's basically I would say it's for us or for me that I have to be positive. It helps me to be positive, helpful, and then become a successful. That is what I would see that.
Yeah, I like there what Lani said. Trust can be even the negative connotation. Whom do I avoid so that I am not harmed? Right? Jagdeep, what about you, Jagdeep? Are you there?
I think for me, trust would mean, somebody you can count on repeatedly without any, there is no aberration that, trust means you're not having to evaluate that person. It is blind trust. Trust means you either trust a person 100%, because in trust there can be no evaluation.
Jagdeep, Lani was asking you why. Why do you,
Otherwise, I can't say that I trust this person 80%.
why? No, why do you want to trust or distrust a person? That's what Lani's question.
No, see, you're living in society, you need to depend on people, you need to depend on everyone.
For
Every
what?
relationship is built on trust.
For what?
For meeting your what is expected from you, for achieving your goals, for your what you're expected to do, what you're expected to deliver.
So you are sorry, we are taking this forward, but permit me to ask this question again. Why do you want to please others' expectation from you? What
No,
happens to you?
no. See, basically, trust. When you trust a person, you are also throwing a safety net around yourself. That this
Correct. I love that. So at last, I mean, all what I'm trying to find out is why do you distrust and trust this?
Yeah.
I mean, probably I am stuck in my own paradigm by saying I'm doing it for my selfish reason, for my own survival. So that's my paradigm. So if I'm asking you
No,
that,
there's see, like he was talking of vulnerability. So how do you counter vulnerability? By trust only. You need something to, that's what they were saying, the difference between faith and trust. Trust is something which is intangible, but yet is tangible also, because it gets delivered not through vacuum but through an individual's behavior or individual's conduct. That's what it is. That's what little I know. That's my interpretation of it.
we are trusting you so that we gain a lot from you.
No, that's so kind of you.
No. What I'm trying to say is, Lani sir, what I'm saying is even the degree of vulnerability depends on the circumstances and with whom you are. I mean, there are circumstances you're most vulnerable or you can expose yourself to your wife, okay, your spouse,
Yes.
your companion, okay. But in certain circumstances, you will not. In circumstances, you will. Yes or no, Jagdeep?
Yes.
That is the strongest relation one has, apart from
Absolutely.
oneself, is with your spouse. And
Yes.
there also it becomes a vulnerability, becomes to me contextual. Under what circumstances will you tell her sweet lies and what?
Yes.
What?
That's a
I'm
that's a
sorry, Lani, to
situational
have
that's a
brought this.
situational variable.
That even Lani, even to that person whom you are closest, vulnerability becomes a subjective matter contextually for your own survival. Sorry for the twist, Lani. I'm getting it recorded, but I may edit all this as a different thing. So just feel free. Trust me, feel free.